people think of human trafficking, they think of something happening half a world away. And in reality, it's right here in our own backyards, big cities, small towns across America.
Yeah, this is dark, this is ugly, this is inhuman, but we're human and we can stop it.
Thank you for the donation. Thank you.
It's rocking a 400 point right now.
It's called the Hellpour face mask.
It's my life, Chad.
It's 400. We're at 400. That's so cute.
I love y'all so much.
So welcome back to See It Ended here on Twitch. Sorry that we missed everyone last week. We're really thankful that you're here tonight. There's a lot of things to be grateful for. The Twitch community really came out in force and really supported See It Ended, the Film and Art Festival that just concluded the end of November. It was an incredible event. It was 6 full days of, I mean, not 6 full days, 6 full evenings of films. We had about 23 films. We had speakers from all over the world. So many different organizations were highlighted. We had panel discussions. We had survivors who gave their testimonies. We had music and dance. It was an incredible event, and it was really thanks to support from a lot of the Twitch audience and Twitch streamers. And it really, Way Cafe really brought this to the forefront of the Twitch community. I'm really grateful to her always. And I really want to thank everyone for being here. And I hope that you can still go to seeitended.org to go on and see what we put together. And this is going to be a growing, thriving, event into the future. It's going to be something that's going to go on month by month, week by week. There's going to be more and more content. It's going to be a place for you to learn and a place for you to get your heart broken and to get motivated to stand up and join something that just is way long overdue. We should not be having in the 21st century, having the millions of people that are enslaved, that are being exploited, that are seen only as a product and not as someone who has, hopes and dreams and a life to live. The thing that really bothers me is just that we are each one of us irreplaceable, and we each have something to contribute to the whole of humanity. And that's being stolen from us. It's something that's being robbed by people who only are interested in making money from the slave labor of others. Tonight, I just feel so inspired because many people think that people that are obsessed or people that are really committed to fighting human trafficking must be the most dark, heavy-spirited, boring people that are just kind of so strung out about something that, man, it's almost never going to affect me. Where do I intersect with human trafficking? But the two guys we have on tonight, I mean, these guys are just really fun to hang with, and they've got a lot to share. They're involved. Both of them have made commitments of their lives in really impressive ways to try to make a difference with human trafficking as it manifests itself today in America and around the world. So I really want to welcome David Deeds is a college professor for 8 years. He teaches criminal justice and human trafficking at multiple institutions of higher learning around the Chicago area. He's designed training courses to raise awareness with law enforcement. He's been on panels. He's worked with people within government. And most recently, through his meeting our other guest, Billy Joe Cain, now he has come to take on the responsibility of working for Radical Empathy Education Foundation, which is just an inspiring thing that I'm really excited to bring to you tonight. The other thing, the way that I met David was through his Facebook page and also his YouTube channel, which is the Human Trafficking Hater. He has brought up so many important issues and really like fleshed out a lot of interesting information that people really are benefited to know about human trafficking. So first, I'd really like to, David, why don't you introduce yourself in a much better way than I ever could.
Oh, no way, man. I mean, thank you very much for I mean, it's flattering that you think that I could do better, but I appreciate you giving me the opportunity. I also want to take the chance to start off by saying thank you to you for the festival that you put on, for bringing everybody to it. I mean, myself and Billy can both attest to uh, trying to bring attention to it and get people involved. It's definitely a serious effort to do so. But that you're competing with all these other things out in the world that are competing for people's attentions, video games and movies and all sorts of other things. So I mean, what a great way to use the movies to get people's attention about this great cause, working against human trafficking. So, for myself, I think you covered most of it. But yeah, and the YouTube channel is just another vehicle, another thing to try to raise awareness about human trafficking. And as you know, you can do it through film. There's people who are doing it through other mediums, VR. I'm not going to give too much away there. I feel like somebody else here might mention something about that. But there's really countless ways that you can raise awareness about human trafficking. And so I believe it's been over a decade now that I've been working against human trafficking. And so I tried to raise awareness by hosting a movie event, and I got people to come out to that, and a legislator came out to it as well. And so it's been a really interesting experience trying to work against human trafficking, and it's also been really rewarding. Just the people that I've connected with, that I've been able to help out, or even just spreading awareness about it. And there's been really impactful things for me where there's been people breaking down crying, and I'm not talking about victims. It's just people that I've interacted with and shared with them about it, and they were so moved that I had I felt really unqualified to know what to do with all of their emotion. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I feel like you covered most of what it is. I designed a human trafficking course. I had to push for 2 years to even be able to teach that in one of the schools that I work at. So they were kind of resistant to it, and that was in a criminal justice program, but I was able to get it in. I taught that. I was looking to expand out more, discussion panel after discussion panel. I've been to so many different churches and just trying to raise awareness about it. And now I found myself on YouTube, and that's where, I had the great opportunity to meet you, and I ended up meeting Billy and just so many other people. So yeah, so that's why I'm here today. And like I said, I'm really grateful that you had me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. I was watching your videos for a long time, and then finally just kind of had to reach out to you because it was just too inspiring what you were doing. Thank you so much. And next, I really want to bring Billy Joe Cain. I think a lot of things have been kind of alluded to and hinted at. He's worked with video in the video sphere and with virtual reality, and most importantly, educational media, which I think it's one thing that really we want to do with See It Ended as well, is really how do we use the highest quality, kind of cutting edge media to really educate young people. Billy Joe's work has been now is being used for high school, middle school students in Texas and California, as well as training medical students at the University of North Texas Health Science Center. And that I can't emphasize enough how important that is, that we educate the people who are intersecting with victims of human trafficking and those that can actually interrupt kids being trafficked. We need teachers to understand. I ran across this when I spoke at some high schools where you had a student would write in an essay something that was very alarming, and if the teacher couldn't read through the lines or read between the lines, it kind of slipped through the cracks, and you'd end up with a kid who would disappear. So all of the work that Billy Joe is doing is just extremely inspiring. Starting from working with Super Nintendo Entertainment Systems and building interactive games, and now kind of all of that now being driven to create educational media for stopping human trafficking. Just really inspiring, and I just can't wait to kind of dig into all the things that you're doing. So let us know a little bit more about you, Billy Joe.
Wow. Yeah, you pretty much said what's going on. First off, yeah, thank you so much for having me on here. I really get really get excited when I have the opportunity to speak to somebody that actually really, cares about this topic. So like you said, I've been making video games and things like that since 1992. I've had the opportunity to do everything from like flight simulators to SpongeBob SquarePants and all kinds of fun games in between. Uh, and luckily, I've had a chance to do a couple of years worth of educational material. So we gamified some things and put some learning materials online. During all this time, I would do work from my house, and so I was working on a distributed project one time. So I'm at home. My kids answer the phone. They would hand me the phone, and I was working with this guy that I'd known for almost a decade, and my kids came to me one time and they're like, "Why is he talking to me about my genitals and pornography?" And both my wife and I found out from the police after we turned him in for this stuff. We found out from the police that that's a technique, a psychological technique called grooming. And although we think we're pretty decent parents around here, we had never really heard much about grooming and how it could actually lead towards sexual assault and or trafficking. It turns out this guy was like a sexual predator. He had done similar things to other people over the years, and but he couldn't get in trouble because he didn't cross a line that I won't necessarily share here, but it wasn't a clear-cut case. So anyway, so that really bothered me for a long time. And as I started getting into making experiences for virtual reality, started seeing that VR had the power to make people care. You could have an emotional relationship with somebody from the designer's point of view towards a user. And so I realized that I wanted to teach people what grooming was in a safe way so they could understand that this was something that happens to people, not because they're choosing to live their life this way, but because they're being tricked, or they're being, coerced into this thing. If they're being, if you send out a dirty text or something to somebody and you don't want that picture to be seen by everybody, you can be extorted. There's sextortion and there's textortion and things like this. So the trick was to try to break down the wall that would get somebody to actually understand that, yes, this could happen in my neighborhood. It could happen to a family member, because I wanted to do something that would really, truly affect people. And it took me about a year to do the research to actually write the script the way it ought to be done. It took me a few months to get people that are in the field to trust me so that they didn't think I was going to come in, take advantage of somebody, or, get somebody's likeness rights and then, take a product from them. Apparently people don't treat survivors as well as they ought to. So during the time I was working on the script, trying to get my head around how you would explain grooming in a first-person scenario, I also was working on VR products to take out in the public and see how the people use them. So I had to work on all the design aspects of how to take advantage of VR hardware, the superpower of VR, and actually deliver the product that would make sense to people. So that's kind of how I got started. And when I told people I needed some money so I could build this virtual reality simulation to, educate people about human trafficking and grooming, they would stop me and they would say, "Okay, you said you want to build a virtual what?" And so I had to build it myself. So my wife and I had sold our house. We took all of the money, put it into Radical Empathy, and we've been on that mission ever since. The idea is to stop the supply by teaching people to be more hardened targets, so we can hopefully make a difference that way. So we're working on the supply end right now.
God, that's so great. And that was the thing when I first learned about human trafficking. It was kind of an international context. Actually, for me, it started with organ harvesting of kids from Darfur and South Sudan, and then that just kind of just caused me to kind of investigate everything I could learn about human trafficking, and then finding out how prevalent it is domestically and down the street and really close at hand. But for me, it was really like the prevention component. It's like we need to do all that we can to to get people out of the life. We need to do all we can to kind of restore them to have the life that they can have, post being trafficked. But we're not going to end it until we really deal with the supply and the demand. And so you've got to do that through kind of education, and it's somewhat in partnership with legislation. You've got to put kind of a real deterrent in there, and so there has to be something in cooperation with legislation. But it's that point when people that are aware are going to be a whole lot less vulnerable than people who absolutely have no clue and they don't recognize the signs of what's happening to them. So what you're doing is just absolutely critical and essential to really making a dent in this.
Yeah, it's a huge multifaceted problem. And the thing about children is that they're relying on their parents, to know how things work. And if the parents don't understand, or the parents have no way to comprehend that their children might not choose to do this,
Right.
It's a big gap, to make that rift work, or to cross that rift to get that communication. So yeah.
Well, and if I can just chime in too, I think what you guys are both saying, it just speaks to why it's so hard to work against human trafficking, and it's hard for a lot of people to grasp, is that it's such a multi-systemic thing. In a world where we can point and click on things, it's so convenient to say, this is the way that we'll fix this. Either we'll vote in this person, or we'll pass this law, or we'll move away. And all these things that we can do, if we don't like something, you can go from one cable channel to the other, and you'll get a completely narrative on what the world looks like. So if you want to fix things, you can even just bury yourself in something. So when it comes to human trafficking, if you don't want to deal with it, certainly you can run from it. Or if you want to view it in a different way, you can go somewhere else. But the only way that you can really work against human trafficking is you can pick out a certain area where you can gain some expertise or understanding in it, and you can really dig into that specific aspect of it. I mean, obviously there's a gradient of like volunteering and things like that and sharing information. But if you're somebody who's going to dedicate your life to it and say, I want to be an expert in working against it, there's the prevention side of it, for sure. There's the reaction side of it. There's the law enforcement side of it. And I think where a lot of people get stuck is that they think that law enforcement is going to fix it. Like how you say, Billy, you were saying that the kids expect their parents to be able to keep them safe. I think society thinks that police officers are going to keep us safe from human trafficking.
Right.
Unfortunately, there's a lot of research that shows that a lot of police officers aren't aware of what human trafficking is, or even how to identify it. I mean, there's some of the best experts are police officers, but on the whole, a lot of police officers are really unaware because they haven't gotten that training. So I think it's great that you mentioned that.
One thing I heard too from some of the law enforcement here in the LA area, but they were saying that it's less than 10% of the protection and the kind of help with preventing human trafficking is going to come from law enforcement and NGOs. It's going to come from an aware public.
Right.
That's where your greatest prevention is going to occur.
Yeah.
I forget the exact percentage. It was like 93% is actually going to come from the public, not from law enforcement and not from these organizations.
Yeah, and I think
help facilitate the education.
The National Human Trafficking Hotline, which is run by a nonprofit, Polaris, they have information that supports that. So out of their like tens of thousands of calls and reports that they've substantiated, I'm pretty sure that it's been individual citizens out in the community or community members that have been the ones that have reported most of that. And I mean, that makes sense with a lot of stuff. If you look at civil rights or whatever, it's a lot of grassroots stuff, people in the actual environment that are doing those things. It's not a, superhero per se that's coming in to rescue you. So I think that can almost be an empowering thing for people, is that you are the change. You are the superhero that's going to make something happen, because Superman can't be there 24/7, regardless if, Billy or I or you know a bunch about human trafficking and ways to fight against it.
Right.
It's about empowering the people who are already in the community to do something.
Well, it's funny too, and the flip side is also true. I mean, I've had this discussion with so many people and a lot of survivors about the movie Pretty Woman, and that was probably one of the most hideous, damaging films made, because it was so popular and it glamorized, a lifestyle. It glamorized, this kind of this the sexualization, the commercial sexualization of women, and it made it look really attractive. And like, Will Gere's Richard Gere's gonna show up, and he's gonna take me away from all this. So all I gotta do is just put in the time, and Richard Gere's gonna show up, and I'm gonna get diamond necklaces, and everything's gonna be cool. And I don't know how many survivors told me that movie like really groomed them. So once they were in a situation where somebody stepped into their life and was going to exploit them, it was like they were already, oh, yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Julia Roberts.
I had the opportunity to be with a lot of different law enforcement groups and survivors and people that are trying to do interdiction. And one of the groups I was working with was doing a sting online to actually try to get people to call in or text them, so they could actually have a conversation with them and explain to them that this wasn't something people choose. Being a buyer is, you're potentially harming people, etc. And what they described to me was that America and the world essentially are being fed this myth of the illusion of choice. So the thinking that these people are choosing to have this happen to them, or that, there's the, Julia Roberts style show that comes in and, as you said, grooms or normalizes that type of behavior. Our culture is part of the problem, and we keep having it pounded in our head that people choose to do this, people choose to do this. Well, what's happening is people aren't choosing to do this. Maybe some people are, and that's their lives to choose. But when you're being forced into this scenario, our cultural myths drive our behaviors, and if we allow those things to take over, all hope is lost. So we have to be fighting a culture war as well.
Well, and I think that's one thing that came out with some of the survivors when we had the first live film festival, was that within certain communities there's a glamorization of being exploited, and there are people who actually see this as a way out of their life, which, I mean, this is one of the horrifying things that I think has come up in a lot of discussions with familial trafficking too, is that, being in a traffic situation actually looks better than what you're living with at home. And that there are people that have seen this as an option for their life, and that's just really, that to me, that's just tragic, that someone would actually see that being trafficked would be a step up from how they're living at home or in their home situation. But again, it's not a choice, like a choice that you're making because you have this spectrum of choices. It's like this is presenting itself as your way out of the hood, or your way out of a certain miserable situation. So it's a little bit better misery than what you've been used to, and so often it doesn't turn into that little bit, it turns into a whole lot worse.
Well, and Patrick, as you're saying that, there was a researcher, Siddharth Kara, who actually he looked at trafficking all around the world for years, and one of the
Yeah.
places he went to was Napa Valley out in California, and he said that that was some of the most accessible slaves that he's ever encountered in his life. The migrant workers, or they're labor trafficking victims, but people call them migrant workers. And so what he discovered was that it didn't matter if they had visas or not, they were still just as likely to become labor trafficking victims. And he figured this out by asking them questions and then ascertaining that they had in fact met the criteria for labor trafficking victims. And what he said was, touching on what you were saying, is that they had found their way there. They knew the risks when the traffickers came to their town and offered to help them get a visa, or help them sneak across the border and promise them a job. They knew that those were risks there. But and I'm paraphrasing what he's saying. I might be butchering a little bit, but he was basically trying to get to the point that it doesn't matter that where they were coming from was worse than where they are right now, right? Being, if they were living in Mexico and surrounded by cartel or whatever it was, it doesn't matter. The fact is that they're still being trafficked at this point in time. So we don't negate their victimization.
Right.
Because you can be somebody who's paid to get smuggled across the border, and that's a crime. You are committing a crime by smuggling across the border, right? But when you come across the border, if at that point in time you have been deceived and now there's a trafficker there to pick you up, we don't blame you because you put yourself in that position, right? We don't say, it's like, you don't see somebody on fire in a house and go, well, they were playing with matches, so the fire department's busy. That's still a victim. You're still going to save that person. So I think that's such an important thing, that a victim is a victim. No asterisks. There's nothing else there. This is a victim, and now we work to save them. So, off
Yeah,
my
that's exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just wanted to make sure that we touched on that.
So before we get too far away, David, how did you get to where human trafficking really was something too significant for you to kind of turn away from?
Okay, so buckle up, because here comes the ride. And I'll give you the condensed version as best I can, because since I do teach, I get to talk as much as I want, and nobody can stop me, or else I give them an F. So I'll be free. It was actually I was in my undergrad, and I had a research project that we had to do. And so I was doing it on rape in America. And when I was looking at the numbers, I looked at the uniform crime reports, which is boring and meaningless to everybody else unless you're in criminal justice. But it basically tells you what crime looks like as a snapshot in the US. And when I looked at it, I saw that there was like 181,000 rapes in the US at that time. And I thought, okay, well, that kind of stinks spread across 50 different states, but because that's only the tip of the iceberg. So we obviously don't know about all the crime that happens. And while I was researching rape, I came across sex trafficking, and I started figuring out that each victim was raped 10 to 20 times a day, if not more, and it was 5 to 6 days a week, if not 7 days a week. And I thought, well, if they're saying that there's these tens of thousands of victims in the U.S., and even if you lowball the 10,000 victims that are sex trafficking victims, and they're all being raped 10 times a day, because that's what it is, then this 181,000 number is way off. And that number was fixing for estimates too, like saying that there was gaps in reporting. And so I thought, well, this is they're not being honest. What they're doing is they're saying that there's 181,000 rapes that's taking place to people that are living in these cities, but people who are taken away or people who are trafficked in place, we're not going to count them or even try to estimate for them. And I thought that that needed to be included. So I actually went back and forth with my professor trying to justify that sex trafficking victims were rape victims. And so he tried to push back that they were actually sex trafficking victims. And I think the like apologist in me came out, and I felt like I just wanted to keep on defending that. So even after the class was over, I researched it. And at that point, I couldn't turn back, because for me, and this is my like where I try to, this is me looking into the camera trying to pull people in moment. um, I always say to people, I'm like, if you met Harriet Tubman right now and she came up to you and said, I need your help, my work isn't done, you'd be like, oh, of course, Harriet Tubman, like you're an abolitionist, and you're absolutely doing the right thing, and you're trying to save people because you know of her legend. But in the moment when she was doing it, there was only a few people, Quakers and a couple other people. Well, she ended up growing her network, obviously, that would help her out. And so I thought, if she's looking at me right now, the job isn't done. There's 20 to 40 million slaves still left in the world, depending on who you ask. So what am I going to do? Just not do anything because she's not here asking me directly? So um, I dug in more. I made all my papers about human trafficking. I just spun it no matter what class it was always human trafficking. And then I wanted to do more. So I reached out to a nonprofit, and I started doing some work with them. I ended up helping to design as you mentioned, a training course for police officers to be more aware. And actually, before I did that, because I was like, how can I possibly reach people? So I hosted a movie event of The Abolitionist, which was a film by Operation Underground Railroad, and with Tim Ballard, and so in that group. And so I hosted that event, and this is, and I'm sorry, this is my condensed version, but when I hosted that event, I was already teaching at the time because I had been researching for years. And so what I did is I made it an extra credit opportunity for my students to attend, because in criminal justice, students don't get exposure to human trafficking. It across the board, it doesn't happen. And so I wanted them to get that exposure. And so to have them go to it, and the learning curve was just really hard to try to get them to show up to it. And I had to cover ticket costs, and then I had to get a discussion group there. I ended up having a local legislator show up to it, so it gave it kind of a little more credibility. And so it was this great event, and I got like 170 people, and I thought, yeah, we're going to be really impactful. And then it ended, and I was like, well, now
Yeah,
what?
yeah.
I didn't have any idea to do. So that's when I connected with the nonprofit. We made the thing to educate the police officers. Uh, and then from there, I made my course, and I ended up teaching the course at one of the colleges. And it was a great experience. I'm glad that I got to teach it. And like I said, after that was over with, I was like, okay, now what? Now more. And so that's the YouTube channel came on, and then Facebook. And now I don't have to look for anything else, because at this point, I've run into Billy Joe. Um, now we're doing it, with radical empathy. I mean, that's a lifelong thing, which is great, because I'm tired of hopping from one thing to the next. I mean, there's always things that I'll still be willing to help out with, and encouraging people to do other things. But where I'm at with radical empathy right now and where we're going, that's definitely the future. So yeah, so I could keep going, but I'm trying to keep
Very,
it.
very cool. Yeah, well, because that was the thing that always bothered me. Like there has to be the follow up with action. So just getting people aware, doesn't change anything really, I mean, unless they really start to do something about it. Because otherwise, I mean, it's uncomfortable stuff. So if you're not really doing anything to fight it, then it just kind of like bothers you, and then you just kind of want to forget about it and go have a beer. Um, and so with the film festival, that was the cool thing that we did with the film festival is we had all the organizations in the lobby. Um, so you walked out of this film, the panel discussion, you got your heart cracked, and then you walked out and you went, what can I do to help you? And so people just went straight to the resource organizations and then signed up, they volunteered, they gave money, whatever. And so we did the same thing now with this year's online one. So if you go on the day, if you go on the platform, underneath the place where you log in to see the whole evening's events are all of the asks, all of the organizations with what they're doing, with their promotion videos. So we just want to drive people to where they can quickly, as easily as possible, find something to connect to that moves their heart that they can then engage with. Because then you're bought into it. Then this is something personal. It's something that's important to you that people know about human trafficking. So we need that action component.
And you guys were so successful in that I watched I think it was the 26 seconds, and it just was ticking, and it was just doing the countdown from the 26. And I mean, and I've been exposed to this stuff, like I said, for over a decade now. And that, like you said, cracking your heart open, like that got to me, that when that ended, there was a new victim. And I try to do the same thing on the YouTube channel. I try to give things, like I'm obviously sharing information, but I try to give ways that people can work against things, and I try to make it as practical and what they like easy as possible. So like when I ran into In-N-Out Burger, works against human trafficking, and so they use some of the proceeds. So I was like, just eat this burger. That's the easiest thing that you can possibly do. And I don't know how many people went out and got In-N-Out Burger because I suggested it, but I do that. And I mentioned about keeping an eye on your kids when they're online, because everybody's worried about, I don't want to say the boogeyman in the van, but I think everybody's looking to the left when over here to the right is there's so many other risks that you have. And so it's, just being aware when you're and I don't make myself, I'm privy to all this, or this can happen to me too, right? Like I'm not like so privileged that I'm above it, because when I was making the video about online safety, one of my sons actually was playing Roblox, and while he was playing Roblox, I actually heard some inappropriate, like somebody had modded the music or something, and I heard something inappropriate in there. So even as I'm making this video trying to help other people out, and I mentioned it in the video, I'm like, hey, like I just heard this on Roblox myself. So it's all these like little things, like what you're saying, these little practical things that you can give to people to try to help them out. And again, I don't know, how far that goes, but I'm, trying to do this something similar at least.
Yeah, it's so important. I think, I mean, for you, Billy Joel, you really like your story of what kind of got you connected to all this, where it was personal. This was a friend that you knew. And I think a lot of people don't realize how close to home it is. And also that you do not want it to be close to home. This is not something you want to deal with, coulda, shoulda, woulda. This is something that really you do not want to go through as a parent, as a brother or sister, to have to deal with it when it does hit home. And I think one of the things that you're doing, like with the virtual reality, which I really want to explore more of, but is this whole, thing of empathy, that we live in a world now. I will never forget, I lived in Japan for 8 years, and then I came back to the States, and there was a show on TV where it was, they would set up these situations. It was kind of like Candid Camera, but it was like person was pushing someone in a wheelchair, and there was an open manhole, and the person wasn't paying attention, and they dumped the person down into the hole, right? And the cameras were all watching the people around who saw this happen, right? And it was, all the people were shocked and like, oh, what should we do? But the way it was set up was you laughed at them for caring. It was also, you treated those people like they were the joke because they were idiots. They fell for it. Right. And I just felt like we're crucifying empathy. It's like these kind of programs where you're making people jaded and like you shouldn't care about what happens to another person because you're probably being taken. And I think what you're doing through virtual reality and focusing on that, how do we increase empathy so that actually, we all start looking out for each other and preventing this?
Well, that is a great question. One of the things that that I find is a theme in trying to get people to be aware of this as a topic in general is that to get somebody to open up to the possibility of actually understanding this is real, you have to have some type of emotional connection. So they, they'll bring a survivor out to a conference and they'll pour out their heart about these horrible things that happened to them and hopefully connect with enough people in the audience. And then after their hearts are open, hopefully their mind is open enough to really pay attention to, what they need to do. And then hopefully at the end of the day, they're going to make a difference, which hopefully will be writing a check to somebody at the very least. So, watching this kind of human, it's human nature, right? So you can say that 990,000 people died in a war, and that's just a number. But if you show one person that died in a war, it's like it really makes an impact. And so that was kind of the mindset that I had on this was like, instead of hitting some people with, statistics, which, are just insane. And the numbers, who knows which numbers are right. But in my world, it's like it's greater than one. That's enough for me. But just to be able to get somebody to really understand this and to try to get them in a situation where they can actually open their heart and realize that that this could be happening. The story itself is good. Trying to put somebody in another person's place is good. But what we found after running about 2,500 people through this experience is that when you put a headset on somebody's head and they are they're experiencing the virtual reality world, they're going through what they call experiential education, which is like your body is moving, so you're engaging one learning modality, you're listening to things, that's another learning modality, you're reading things, which is another modality. And the more of those modalities that you're activating for somebody, kinesiology, or kinesthetics, you're moving your body around, it puts you there. And on top of that, you got a headset on so you can't see anything else, and you got headphones on so you can't hear anything else. You're not getting texted, you're not getting distracted, there's not a squirrel outside the window, you're not looking at this other person who's scratching the back of their head. The teacher is always there in the room with you. It doesn't matter what kind of attitude somebody had on the drive over. So you have that opportunity to have that unique personal connection with that person. But just like you, it's like once you've gotten them awake to the reality of this and you put some more information in them, you really do have to get them involved. So the last part of our program is actually an empowerment program where we teach people what they can do in their own neighborhood, in their own house, even where they can make a difference on a grassroots level. I went on a type of trafficking training in Waco one time, and they basically had gone through the phone book and they made a list of all the businesses that were in the general vicinity, and they handed out everybody envelopes. Inside the envelopes were 10 businesses you were supposed to go try to take a flyer to and see if they could put it up in the front window, in the back, whatever, even in the break room. And so I had my 10 with my buddy, and we went out, and one of the places was a police station, and they would not let us hang it up. A couple of the places were corporately owned businesses. They wouldn't let us hang it up. A couple were gas stations. They wouldn't let us hang it up. And I mean, like, not hanging up anywhere, like even in the bathroom or in the back of whatever they were doing. But we went to one Mexican restaurant. It was family owned, and they let us put it up. So if you're having that kind of problem, where you just have to keep going to place after place after place just to put a sign up that just says, hey, here's what human trafficking is. We're not going to solve this on an institutional level. We're going to have to solve this on a person by person level. And that's what we want to do. We call our program One Generation because we want to end this in one generation. And the only way we're going to do it is to scale massively, provide fact-based and measurable materials and results, and get people activated in their own areas. If we can do those things, we're going to succeed. And that's my big thing right now is, we're trying to do the thing that will scale the easiest, which is take all of our program, including the 3D interactive experience, the immersion of it, the story of it, and put it inside of a web browser. So you're actually still getting a three-dimensional experience, and we're going to add a rich media experience on top of that. So videos will play and people can get the power of the internet. So we're going to hopefully drag them into the browser, and they're going to want to play around in the browser because they can get new content all the time. And obviously that means we can scale, worldwide instantly.
Yeah. Yeah, well,
Make
I'm
people
really,
want to make it in their own homes, right?
yeah. I think that's right. I really hope that there's some, we can help you with a lot of that exposure through See It End It. That it would just be such a great partnership. The guy David who started Emerge Studios, so we partnered together when we had to go online with the festival, um, and he's worked with virtual reality. He's done a couple of different projects for Make a Wish Foundation where they've used virtual reality, um, and so he's really excited. I got to get you two together, but there's just so much potential there. About your posters, it's interesting. It's California passed a law, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago now, that required certain businesses to put up a poster. I mean, it was required by law. They had to put up these posters.
Right.
And so I was one of the initial team of going out and telling them and giving them the posters. You have to put these up by law. But it was one of those examples of the weakness of legislation, and that it's like somebody got to put their name on a bill that they're fighting human trafficking, but no one in the bill was required to implement it, and there was no consequences if you didn't comply. It was just this shell of a law. And then a couple of organizations here in LA, they took it on. And they said, this has been sitting here for 2 or 3 years on the books, and nobody's done a thing with it. This law was passed, so we'll take responsibility to do it. And it took that kind of commitment. And so the posters got printed, and they trained people to go out and go to the businesses. And it was an interesting response because that had the legality behind it. You had a letter from the attorney general saying, you have to put these posters up. And so they couldn't exactly just say no. But you saw the flaws in certain areas, like the massage parlors. So they have a really powerful lobby here in California, and they got exempted. So only certain massage parlors were included, and most of them were not. And there were so many little loopholes and things in it, and it was really discouraging on one hand, and on the other hand, it was the people who went out. We had a really great experience because every person we said, we're here from the state of California, and this is a law you've got to put into effect. And let me tell you about human trafficking. So we got to talk to business owners, bar owners, a lot of different places, which was the good thing. But it's just hard to come up with something people don't find a way around.
And Patrick, when you speak to the law, oh, sorry, Billy, do you want to go ahead? Okay.
I was going to tell him the story that came out of the Texas State Student Councils thing. So we got invited to go up to the Texas Association of Student Councils annual conference, which happens in Arlington. This was I guess early 2018. So we go there, and it's like there's going to be 4,000 students and adults and parents and teachers and things like that are there. And they've asked us to demonstrate on Saturday, and they asked us to run a bunch of breakout sessions on Sunday. So we go, and I'm like, well, we're going to have nothing but, elected student officials. They decided human trafficking was going to be their cause for the year. So they were like, everything was about, discussing human trafficking, having people around, et cetera. Man, and this is a really long story, and I'll try to make it short. The students wanted it, the adults didn't. The students had to push harder, and then they got it. And so this was the end of the year, and I thought, all right, let's find out how many of these kids had good training in their school, what was going on with it. And because, I'm concerned about, finding out what the market might want. I want to know their level of technology, Wi-Fi, internet, blah, 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 blah. So what we found out is that 86% of the people we interviewed or people that we got forms back from said they did not get any training whatsoever in human trafficking at their school. And so these are the student leaders that they ran for office, they got voted in, they wrote, they did the posters and everything. And then they drove, hundreds of miles to get to Arlington, and they are like, we couldn't make it happen. So when we sat with in these rooms, there was three sessions of 150 people. So almost 500 kids, only 2 adults came out of the 450. So what we found out from these kids was, we're not getting any sex education. We want to be trained on human trafficking so that we can avoid it and know what it is. I mean, these are kids that are literally standing up and demanding this in the room with us. And they were just disgusted with the adults. So, the problem, in my opinion, isn't that kids don't want to know about this stuff. The problem is the adults don't want to teach them. And I think that just continues going on until you get older. And for some reason, this is just one of those topics that you just rather not talk about with your children. And I'm afraid that, this is happening to little children, 12 to 15 years old, and every other age up and down, but in a very crucial time in their lives where, if you have the right person with the right methodology of teaching this thing and has the right way to reach somebody, I think we have a real chance. So I just wanted to kind of get it out there that it's been my experience that people want to learn about it, but people don't want to teach them. So how crazy is that?
Yeah, hopefully that's beginning to change. I don't know if you saw, like, on the prevention night of the film festival, we showed a film called Our Kids Online, and this was by Robin Zareen in New Zealand, and they started to realize from their kids, the kids were like they wanted their tablets, they wanted their smartphones and stuff at pretty young ages because all their friends had them, and they started realizing that hardcore pornography, that all this stuff was on there with 24-hour access to kids, and they didn't know what to do, and so they started looking at, like, how do we navigate this as parents, for kids, and they couldn't find stuff, so they ended up taking their life savings, flew to America, and made this documentary, which was it's just one of the best that I've seen for really opening your eyes. I mean, it's really targeted towards parents, but it's raw and it's real, and it's, I mean, the things that they brought up, they interviewed a forensic nurse who works with kind of sexual assault victims, and she was saying that when she went into this field, she thought, that this was going to be children who are being abused by adults, and she said actually it's like 44% of the cases she's seeing are a child sexually assaulting another child because they're acting out and imitating what they're seeing in porn. And I mean, it's such a good documentary. I can't endorse it enough for opening parents' eyes to the reality that their kids are living through, because it's another world. It's not Playboy magazine and your dad's mattress.
Yeah, dude. These phones, they're predators in your pocket. I mean,
Yeah.
the only answer I have for a parent like that is like, dude, get your kid a flip phone, no internet access. That's it. Just stop this smartphone garbage. Just stop.
You know what though? It's with e-learning, I'm experiencing this with my kids because I have 3 kids that are on e-learning. They're If you're lucky enough, in the school district that we're in, they gave computers to the kids. So all your kids now have laptops, and a part of the curriculum they have, it'll take you to a YouTube video. But if they don't click off that YouTube video at the end, they're able to still go in and look at more YouTube videos. And then it can keep on linking them to whatever they want. And now they're in YouTube, which is I'm not a tech person, but I'm pretty sure it's the second largest search function behind Google. I'm pretty sure that YouTube is like the biggest index or something along those lines. So if you give your kid a flip phone, which is a great idea, then you're keeping them safe in that aspect. But you're not thinking of all these, because that's what a trafficker is doing, is for any avenue in, whether it's
They're looking for things to
on
exploit. Yes.
yeah, or if it's going to be online, and you wouldn't think that, oh, the school computer that has the thing that they're doing on there because you're off busy doing your job from home and dealing with the whole pandemic as well. And then unbeknownst to you, they've clicked into, YouTube, and there's a chat function that's taking place there. And it's these these things that are, I think Billy was talking about this earlier, is that it's not the way that you think it is. It's not taken. You're not
Right,
drugged
exactly.
out of your room and your dad cartwheels across the Atlantic Ocean and punches like 15 people in the face and saves you. That's not how you end up getting trafficked. You end up getting trafficked because you're vulnerable, and the things that make you vulnerable are different for different people. So you're vulnerable because you're a child and you're not able to discern these things, and because you have a single parent household, it makes you more vulnerable because now the supervision level is not going to be able to be there for you, because that parent's having to work, and the neighborhood that you live in. And so there's all these different things that can add to it. And again, not to go off on a tangent here, but there's this thing known as cumulative disadvantage. And so they use that to understand why it is that people join gangs. And so the reason why this person was joined a gang is because they had all these disadvantages. And they found that the disadvantages added up, but they didn't just add up, they really multiplied. So when you had 7 disadvantages, you weren't just 7 times more likely than the person who had 1 disadvantage, you were 13 times more likely to join a gang. So it's really like, why did this person fall off this cliff and join the gang? It's because you kept on stacking these things and you put them right here on the ledge, and all they had to do was make one bad choice. And so the same thing for trafficking. You keep on stacking up vulnerabilities for somebody, of course they're going to end up being a trafficking victim, or they're significantly more likely for it. So all this access and stuff, and even we don't even understand it. And that's the whole point of, I think,
Right.
what Radical Empathy is doing so great is getting the education out there to people to say, hey, look, come into this virtual world or come online in this web-based program, and then there's this curriculum that's wrapped around it to give you another weapon to fight against human trafficking, to keep your kids just that much safer. And I think that's it's a tool, but it's this whole toolbox really.
Yeah, one of the viewers just made a statement that with YouTube, within 7 clicks, you can be in a really dark place on YouTube.
Yeah,
it doesn't take very long.
great point.
I have a lot of people that we use as a brain trust around here, and so one of them is an adolescent addiction specialist, and he was telling me, that he deals with people with all sorts of addictions, even pornography, and he said that he had a 10-year-old kid come into his office and say, "I am addicted to pornography." It wasn't like his parents said it and he was like, "No, I'm not." He's like, "No, dude, I am totally addicted to pornography." And I'm like, 10 years old and knows he's addicted.
Yeah.
I mean, we as a society are failing our children. I don't have the magic answer and I can't tell you what it is, but I'm telling you, with results like that, that's just pathetic.
Well, I don't know if you're familiar. Are you familiar
it's
with
hard to blame the parents necessarily, because the parents can't watch that kid 24 hours a day.
And you can't keep up. But are you familiar with Fight the New Drug?
I'm not.
They're one of the best organizations. They really look at pornography, but and the link with human trafficking. But they look at pornography strictly from science. I mean, they don't get into moralizing and all those kind of things. But they're just looking at the science of it. But they started what was called Fortify, and it's a program for young people and kids who are having problems with pornography, and they're flooded with calls from 13-year-olds and 15-year-olds and very young kids who are being exposed to this stuff and realize that they can't see a screen without going to porn. I mean, it's like their brains are rewiring around it, and you look at that kind of just the science of what happens, especially with aggressive sexual content, which is really kind of where you get led down this kind of like very slippery slope, is to more and more violence and humiliation, porn, and a lot of that then you don't know what to do with it as a kid. Especially, this is normalizing behaviors, it's normalizing how you're feeling. All kinds of things get just distorted by this industry. But I think Fight the New Drug is one of the best, I think.
Yeah, there's no doubt that it is seriously affecting generations of people in their interpersonal relationships, their sexual relationships, their the way they feel about gender norms and stereotypes. I mean, everything is being thrown out of whack by the availability of porn to children. And I'm in the quote tech industry, so to speak, and I can tell you right now, there's no way you can keep your kid away from that stuff. There's just not.
Yeah.
There's no way to do it. If they
It's
have
not
technology or access to the internet, you can't stop it.
Well, and I think it plays into it makes grooming just that much easier, right? Because if grooming is the whole point is to get your kid to a point where they're accepting of the thing that's going to come, right? That's why you'll see in trafficking, they'll have some girls that they'll have, and I say girls, boys are definitely a part of it. I think boys make up 1 in 20 sex trafficking victims. So I go to girls because
In
that's
America.
the majority of it. But
Yeah, that's right.
yeah, boys I think are 6% of sex trafficking, but at least of identified victims around the world. So, but they'll have the girls start off in strip clubs, and the process will be that you came out of foster care, or you're out in the streets, or runaway, and so nobody's been nice to you for a whole week, and for you that's a lifetime, because as Billy Joe said, between 12 to 15, a week seems like a lifetime, and you're down on your luck. And now this person treats you great for 2 weeks, and they'll do things that are just like buy you clothes and take you to Six Flags. And Patrick, maybe your viewers already know this, so I don't want to be redundant. But within those 2 weeks, that's enough time. There's definitely research that backs up. That's enough time that the hook has already been set. So at 2 weeks, 3 weeks, now I've invested maybe a couple $100s, and I can ask you, look, I want us to make it. So now I need you to help me out. And if it's not doing a favor for a friend, it could be, I just need you to dance a couple nights. And you think that's fine because it's just dancing. I'm not doing anything with anybody. But what's happened is I've just moved my line. And now once you're dancing, now it's I need you to do a couple of like personal dances in a private room in the back, but nothing sexual happens. And the line has moved and it keeps happening until when you finally have that person make the jump into sex trafficking, into commercialized sex, it doesn't seem as big of a jump. And I think that's the problem is this part here, not to just make obligatory hand movements here, but this part is what I think a lot of people in society don't get. Is human trafficking isn't a robbery and it isn't a murder. It doesn't happen like that. It's usually going to be a progression that's going to be taking place. Yes, people can get kidnapped and thrown in the back of vans. That does happen. But on the whole, coercion is going to be used a lot more and fraud will be used a lot more to move the line until this person ends up being this person. But as I said before, we don't care about all this. We care about this part. This is a victim. It doesn't matter how they got to be a victim, except for, combating it and all that stuff. But when we're deciding how we're going to treat this person, a victim is a victim. And so I think that that's, an important thing.
Well, traffickers have said that they don't have to do any grooming anymore. That the grooming is already being done, like in their families and all the stuff that they're doing already, the crazy stuff they're doing online. Yeah, there was a film that I saw, bringing up the stripping. There was a film that I saw years ago where it was an undercover film that was done where someone went in and was talking to a guy who ran a strip club, and he was so boastful. And he talked about, he would do these little things. Like one was you'd hire a girl and start to pay her, $900 a week. So she's thinking, oh, this is pretty good pay. This is a good job. And then she would go and she'd move into a more expensive apartment and put a down payment on a car. And then once he heard that she had done that, he would fire her. And then she would panic. And then he would like, okay, if you want your job back, you're just gonna have to do a little extra stuff. You're gonna have to play ball with these other things that I want you to do. And he would laugh. It was very intentional. This is just very intentional. And then the next thing he said was he would regulate how much toilet paper the girls could use. So you can only use 3 pieces of paper. That's it. And he said the reason he did that was because
Control.
If he controlled you about these little things, then you wouldn't even think you had control of quitting or to say no to something bigger. There was this chipping away at your sense of autonomy that made you vulnerable to whatever he wanted you to do, kind of down the road.
And going and the way that they use technology now against them to keep that control. So there's been examples of a trafficker will have a girl go from Detroit out to, in some cases, like Honolulu or all the way out to California. You think, how can this person have such control over that individual? Well, one, the manipulation that's taking place over here, the coercion that's been set in there, and even more so if it's from a younger age, because they're going to be more malleable and manipulated. But they'll use things like Snapchat, and they'll say, look, you need to be out on that track, out on the street working or wherever it is that you're supposed to be. And they'll say, I want you to Snapchat me right now. And so then they have to Snapchat. And then, of course, it's, supposed to be erased or, goes to a server somewhere else. It's at least harder to track than, taking a picture. But so they do it on Snapchat. And that confirms for this trafficker who's thousands of miles away where it is that this girl is supposed to be. And again, it's kind of making people just aware of the control aspects that's going into it and the progression that goes along with it. Then you start to understand what human trafficking is more. And now that's part of you empowering yourself, right?
Yeah,
So that you can go ahead and work against it more. So, yeah.
How about if we show one of the videos? Like, we want to show yours, Billy Joe?
Sure. So what we're going to see is a what we call an experience event, where we go on site, invite a whole bunch of people from the community to all come and try out our experience. You really have to put a headset on to really understand what it feels like to be inside virtual reality. You can talk about it all day, but until you put that headset on and the world, kind of disappears and you're in a different area. And since the way these headsets work, you feel like this thing is really there because your head moves towards it and it's really like you would expect it in a video game. That sense can only be done inside the headset. So what you're going to see is Lieutenant Angela Merritt, who works with the Houston area trafficking task force. She is this is her first time she's ever used virtual reality, and she's taking a lot of training. So as she goes through here, you're going to hear her. Well, she's had a lot of life and professional experience and a lot of training experience. So what you're going to hear is her assessment of what she experienced in our VR experience versus the reality of what she sees every day.
Great. Great.
I think that we're in denial a lot of times because we don't want to believe that it could be our child. But I think that parents need to be open. They need to realize that this is not just occurring in third world countries. It's not just occurring in urban areas. It's happening in the suburbs. And I think that once they become more proactively involved, then they'll realize that they too can help. Very real, it's very typical from what I see on a daily basis when investigating human trafficking incidents. So it was very real. That she wasn't getting along at home is one indication. The fact that she was online with this man that started buying her things, clothing, it's very accurate. It's on point on how they meet their victims online. It's on point with how they groom them in the initial meeting, where they find some type of avenue and where they can seek, or the victim may be seeking some type of attention that they're not getting at home, and they target that area, and then they go from there, and then it turns into the vicious cycle of the control, manipulation, and the coercion. The scenario is so factually based that it would help them to be exposed to putting themselves in that situation and then realizing that this could happen to me just like it happened to that young lady. They find it hard to get out of life. Like she said, I can't go out the window, I can't go out the door because he beats me. And even though they're not shackled, they're not chained up, the chains are in their minds because they've been conditioned over and over again, either by the beating or the not being able to eat or sleep, and that causes the trauma. This puts the person, the potential student, in that scenario where a regular PowerPoint presentation cannot add that effect, where I'm in that situation personally, viewing it, hearing it with my own eyes and ears. Schools, definitely, businesses, employers, anyone, everyone in society can benefit from this, definitely. Because that's what the problem is that we all have to work together in order to fight this human trafficking issue, because it's huge, it's phenomenal. And not one, law enforcement alone can't do it, community can't do it by themselves, parents can't do it by themselves. It takes a collective effort from all of us to work together in order to solve the problem.
Man, I really do hope people donate and really keep you going. That's powerful. It's so powerful.
Well, thank you so much. One of the things that we would like to ask people to do today is not necessarily donate money, but come join us through our email subscription. So if you go to reefcares.org, subscribe. That is what we really need help with. We've got to get the word out about what we're doing. We're going to be running a big Kickstarter coming up in the beginning of 2021. And we really need help get the word out. So yeah, I know Russia's going to come out and they're going to be part of it. But the whole point is that we need to get volunteers that are willing to do things for us, like share things on social media, maybe post things to their mailing lists if they have groups of people, their followers, whatever it takes, whether it's even making something else and posting it about us as it is. We really just need to get eyeballs, because taking this thing online is not going to be cheap, but we are actually going to be offering seats. So if somebody donates a certain amount of money, they'll get a certain amount of seats so they can actually use it whenever it's online. And the last thing I would say about all that, while I'm busy kind of promoting what we do, Anyone that's a licensee of ours, if you have a license, you get the version on Vive or Rift or Oculus Quest or online. So when you're a major group like a school, in our University of North Texas, they actually have they have access to all the versions if they want them. When we go online, they're all going to get online logins as well. So right now it's about spreading the word that it's going to be there and that people are going to have access to the best training that they can get in the planet on a web browser.
And
So,
so, Patrick, do you mind if I just jump in really quick just to continue what he's saying for a second?
absolutely not.
Okay.
That's why you're here.
Okay, cool. For a second, they were going to say absolutely no, and I was like, "Oh, dang it! I knew it was going to happen." But yeah, exactly what Billy Joe is saying is that everybody has a role or everybody has a part at Radical Empathy, right? So if you can donate, that's great. That obviously we would be more than happy and we would be very appreciative if you could donate. But if you could, it's right down the little chalkboard. But if you can just share the information, right? Be like a social media advocate. That's also great, right? Like for the car to run, you need everything. You need the lug nuts, you need the tire, you need the engine, you need the headlights. Like everything counts. So whatever it is that you could possibly do, and spreading the word to one other person even might be the thing that ends up making it where you share it with that one person who shares it with a school, and now it gets into that school, and now there's hundreds of students, if not thousands of students that are ended up being affected by it. So I mean, it's just absolutely everybody has a part at Radical Empathy, and it's all leading up to that. Not to re-promote it, but leading up to this Kickstarter that we're obviously really excited about, because if everything goes well leading up to the Kickstarter, we'll have a bunch of people on board and involved to help us fight against human trafficking, which we've all committed our lives to at this point. And then the Kickstarter goes through, then we can get that web-based program. And the whole point of that is that web-based can reach so many more people than the VR. Because I have a VR headset that Billy Joe sent to me, but we can't keep on mailing these things out to each person. But the web base can be so powerful. So it's the thing where I see so many people, whether it's on YouTube or Facebook, and they're like, I want to do something. What's the number one thing I can do right now? Like, yeah, you can donate. Yes, you can volunteer. You can do all of those things. But if you can join up with us in any way, you can be a part of getting what I believe could be the most powerful educational tool about human trafficking out there in 2021.
I couldn't agree with you more. And I'm so inspired because this is exactly why we created the kind of See It Ended as a platform. So it's not just an event, but it's a platform where we can use this. So you come out with something, we can blast it out. We can have a virtual global event around what you're putting out, right? And then you can have your own page. So each organization will have its own page on the platform. So that can be kind of sent out to everyone, and you can use it also to drive people to your own website. So they'll come on to the platform, see you, watch your video on the platform, and then go directly to your website and support you there. But it's an amazing. This is what we want to do, is get the word out on things like this, and also down the road. I mean, we started as a live event, and then we had to go to online because of COVID, and eventually we'll go back to a combination thing of live events and online. And so what we want to do is this was my goal from the beginning, which is only 3 years ago. But when I first got this idea of having a film festival and kind of approaching culture, to deal with culture, was to go to a place like LA Live, which if you're not in LA, you don't know what that means.
I do.
People are actually alive in LA, but it's like between like Nokia and Staples Center. It's this massive open area between two of the largest venues for concerts and sports events in LA. And then right next to it is a movie theater. So to have the Film and Art Festival take place in this huge area, I mean, we can accommodate tens of thousands of people could come and have a concert, have music, and then we could also do a whole virtual reality thing. If we had like 300 headsets, and have people come in and have this virtual experience, and then have the whole kind of quad area just full of resource organizations too that you could connect to. So anyway, that's my vision for 1 or 2 years down the road. But I mean, this is so important that you have the platform to be able to get exposure to what you've done, because this is so critical.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're trying to do. And Billy Joe, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but
Very good.
it's just it's not even just targeting one specific group. So if you're somebody who's like, "Oh, I hope they've reached the person that they're trying to get to," it's you. You're the person that we're trying to get to, right? Like
Yeah.
you was thinking like, "Well, I can't be me because I don't have any money, so I can't do that." No, you can have a Facebook and you can share, with it doesn't matter if you don't have 10,000 friends, you can share with just a couple of people. And so, and if it doesn't matter if you say, "Well, I'm not really, I don't understand it." You can understand. We have plenty of resources on the webpage. If you go to reefcares.org right now, you'll see that there a bunch of information on there on what human trafficking is, what you can do to start, keeping your kids safe from it right now, and
Yeah.
just our whole story is up there.
I got a question online. Someone saying, what about augmented reality for users on phones, which would be more
We
accessible than those without the virtual reality headsets?
No, that's a really great question. So just for listeners that may or may not know what the difference is between augmented and virtual reality. So virtual reality is when it officially is when it's a computer generated image that's basically blocking your field of view. So when you put the headset on, you can't see light or anything from outside. Augmented reality can be thought of as if you're a combat pilot and you put a headset on and there's a little reticle that shows you where a bad guy is, and you see the little targeting thing saying I'm moving at this latitude and longitude. I'm not sure all the words are, but you see all that stuff popped up on your vision. So the question about having it in a phone, you have two options. One, you can go AR, which allows the pass through of the camera, so you have things that are in front of you, like popping up, like you have on Pokemon Go, or you can go full VR and put your phone into a headset. What we have found is that the real challenge isn't making it work on a phone, because we've already done a version for phones and put it out there. The real challenge is putting it in context. So when I have somebody using it on a phone, I can't really guarantee that they're going to go and read material and they're going to follow through and those kind of things. So we're not trying to recreate the VR 3D world on a phone. Our roadmap right now is to go through a web browser, and then we'll make an application that's downloadable for your phone, but it'll have a whole different way to interact with it. I do not want to just port this thing from one platform to the next. I always want to adapt it to the best thing. So like a phone version would feel completely different. A tablet version would feel different. As you put your finger on the screen, you would want to make moving it around have some sort of tactile feedback. So for me, it's all about take advantage of the hardware. And the phone just really isn't going to give you the immersion level that we want. Unless I'm not thinking about it right. I mean, I'm willing to try anything. I think you'll find that my favorite word is yes. The only question I really have is how. So we've done a phone version before. I have a build, an early build on the phone that I can play it on this guy right here. But the whole experience is different. You need to have new controllers or new look mechanisms or things like that. But I think the point they're trying to make, if I'm not mistaken, is dude, make it work for more platforms. And the answer is you bet. You better believe it. That's what we're trying to do. And ultimately, when this thing is done, since your phone will have a browser on it, you probably be able to use it on your phone too.
Well, and just adding that,
I'm not guaranteeing that yet. I'm guaranteeing it's going to work on a really cheap a Chromebook, a Google Chromebook that's really inexpensive. That don't make more into this than what it is. But poor people in America, whatever the device is that they have, that's what's got to be my minimum specification. It's got to be something that people have.
Well, and I was going to add to it that there's a curriculum that goes with it. So it's
absolutely, yes.
It's more than just I mean, as a novice to VR, when Billy Joe sent me the headset, I was over the moon. He has the video. We did a Zoom when I put it on, and I was going through it, and I was like, yeah, you're touching on all this stuff, right stuff here, and this hits this, and this hits this. But there's a curriculum that we have designed to go around the VR and to go around the web-based program. So it's kind of, if you think of like a carpenter doesn't just have one tool to go do a job. If you hired a carpenter to come fix your cabinets and they showed up with a screwdriver, even if it was the nicest screwdriver ever, you'd be like, this is not going to work. So we want to make sure that we're giving people all the tools. And I mean, if a phone version comes down the way, there's got to be a way to incorporate as much as possible of the curriculum part into it. So that way it's as useful to people as possible. Because if they just get it and it's this really shiny, interesting thing, it might be useful to that person who's already got years of researching into human trafficking. But what good will it be when they hand it off to, their kid or whatever to try it out, and they breeze through it in 12 minutes and then they're all done. If we can find interesting ways to have them still have his Billy Joe has taught me agency, to move around, but also make it where even as they're freely moving about, they're still getting the curriculum or the information that they need to be getting. So that way it ends up working as best as possible. So I think that's another piece to the puzzle.
That's very cool, because that was the thing we found even in starting with the film festival, was showing a movie is great. It gives you a certain awareness,
Right.
but it was the panel discussion afterwards where you had survivors and law enforcement and people, all different aspects of fighting human trafficking, being able to flesh it out and peel away more and more of it. So it really becomes much more real. The films are really important. Films can just crack open your heart, and they make you willing to learn and willing to be motivated. And then giving more context that can really then point you more in the direction of what you can do. So that the two together, that's really powerful.
Well, and just to add on to this, when I taught that class on human trafficking, I was so jacked for this thing because I had been for years researching human trafficking, and I was like, great, now I've got people trapped in a room and they have to listen to me. So I'm gonna and so I did. I mean, I did. You have a lot of academic freedom in college, so you can. But I mean, I designed this syllabus was just from the ground up, and I had everything in here that I wanted to touch on, and for weeks I was just I was going, full Southern Baptist. I was giving them the whole thing, and I was, up in arms and excited. And they were kind of like, okay, yeah, that sounds horrible. That's bad. Organ trafficking. That sounds nasty. And like, oh, sex trafficking for kids under 10. And then I showed them, I think in like the 11th or 12th week, I showed them a video by, I mentioned him earlier, Siddharth Kara. He made the movie Trafficked. And when I showed them that in class, they were up in arms. Then they were upset. And they were saying the things that I had mentioned before, but they had not conceptualized it. They had the information, but they hadn't coalesced it into knowledge yet because they didn't have the empathy factor, right? They needed the empathy. They needed to actually touch with the content for it to matter to them. And so when they saw the video, they're like, I can't believe this is happening. And I'm like, well, we just talked about this for like 12 weeks. And so I 1,000% agree with you that the medium of video can bring them along or can bring anybody along in so much more profound ways. And that's why with the VR and with the web based, it's a video aspect, but it's also where you're interacting with it. And so, as Billy Joe had touched on before, these more of these elements where you're interacting with it, the more that you're kind of, I don't want to say buying into it, but the more that you're open to the experience. And so
Yeah,
I
right.
think that it's just the idea of getting the arts involved into human trafficking is something a couple of years ago I wouldn't have even thought about it. But between you two, it's just I almost think it's the future at this point.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, music is just so powerful in motivating people and stimulating people in really negative ways or in really positive ways. And I think David Zach is one of the musicians who his band since the 90s has been really committed to fighting human trafficking. And he worked with Exodus Roads. He's gone and done rescues, gone undercover in different parts of the world. And then he writes these songs like Commodity and different songs that were just really hard hitting and powerful about human trafficking. And when you can kind of bring in the arts, music, dance performances can be so powerful, and just really speak to the emotions of people. And then you kind of flesh that out with an understanding. It's just incredibly powerful.
Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
couple people did a year ago. I went to a discussion panel at a college not far from my house, and they had done a play on human trafficking. And so, plays, music, and I attended a TED talk, and everything, and I've talked with Billy Joe about this. Everything that I see it through the lens of human trafficking, or how can I incorporate educating human
Yeah.
trafficking? So while I'm at this TED talk, all these different people are going to, and there was this guy who was singing a song, and all he was doing was teaching people how to write a song. That's what his TED Talk was on. And I'm like, I wonder if I could get this guy to write a song about human trafficking. I'm like, how could you write a song about human trafficking without it just being so depressing that people just like immediately turn it off? And then here you're mentioning this guy who's made a
Yeah.
career out of doing that. So
No, it really is true. And we've had people like screenplay writers who are now offering to provide their guidance to a survivor telling her story. And we need stories. We need this to be real. It's got to be a flesh and blood reality to people. And so he's offered to do that. We have, I mean, just amazing people that are taking their skill set and then how do we apply this to trafficking, to
Right.
making a difference here. It's just so wonderful to see, this kind of like unfolding.
Well, and that for me, that's why I had to teach. That's why I designed that course, is because I was like, what am I good at? And I'm like, okay, what Jesus has given me the gift of gab. I can talk nonstop, and I teach in a classroom. So let me see how I can put that. Yeah, you know better than most. And Patrick, we talked about this before I even designed the course. I went through, because since I teach in criminal justice and I've been teaching for nearly a decade in criminal justice, I know that none of the textbook have anything about human trafficking. They have very little. So I did my own content analysis because I'm totally a nerd. And I went through 5,000 pages in, I believe it was 10 or 11 different criminology and criminal justice textbooks looking for different phrases about human trafficking. And what I found was just appalling that out of 5,000 pages, there was 51 that had anything to do with human trafficking. And then when you got into what that actual content, because it was a content analysis, when you got into the actual content, it was mostly international trafficking, or it would talk about sex trafficking, but it wouldn't talk about it in the coercion aspect of it. So very little talk about that was present. And I just thought, this is ridiculous. Like, you're having people that are going to be police officers, which the public is expecting them to understand what human trafficking is and keep them safe from it. And they don't know anything. And well, I don't say anything. They don't know that much about it because they're not getting it in the academies. They're not getting it in their continuing learning credits. So if they're not going to get it when they're at the college level, when are they supposed to get it? So that's when I said, well, okay, well, where can I fill in the gap here?
People don't realize how important these little things are. You just kind of assume that, of course, law enforcement knows, or judges. Of course, judges know.
Right.
And it's like, I spent time with one judge here in LA, and she said for years and years she kept scolding these teenage girls who are getting arrested for prostitution. You're being bad. Why are you destroying your life? And she never listened to them. And she finally reached the point where she listened and she heard, and she felt so bad because she said for years I've been blaming them, and they were the ones who are being exploited. And once she changed, they started the Star Court here in Compton in LA, to really deal with kids who are being exploited. Like really, how do we treat them as a population in a way that really acknowledges what they've been through? And law enforcement, Long Beach vice cops, they changed the interrogation techniques. You don't come into a steel table, you don't bring in a 13-year-old to a steel table and start interrogating her about her pimp. But they have a couch and stuffed animals. You bring them in, you make them feel that they're treated, they're being respected, which completely goes, flies in the face of what they've been told by the traffickers is going to happen. And then little by little, you start to build a case. And how important it is. 9/11 operators that have no clue what human trafficking is. We found out here in LA, 911 operators had no clue what human trafficking was. So you'd call in and they'd send you off to somebody who had wasn't going to be able to help you at all. So there's so many things like that in your community, you can do.
I'd like to put out there, that we've done a lot of public conferences, trying to get people to, try our product and understand how, what their interaction is with it, watching them physically and, talking to them before and after. And constantly, it is the constant refrain. I had no idea. I didn't realize this could happen to anybody. This brought up a lot of emotional stuff for me. It made me think about my divorced father, because inside of the application, we tried to hit as many of those risk factors as possible. So in the story, she's 13 when she gets trafficked. It's her birthday on the day that she's actually talking to you about how this stuff happened. We talk about how her trafficker has her actually on an invisible chain, so to speak, with her cell phone. So it's like, not only, do you get get the notion disabused that you can, oh, if you got a cell phone, you can just call home and get help. It's like, nope, we made sure that's explained, because the guy met her online and he knows her social media contacts. He started dating her, so to speak. So he knows where she lives, and mom, parents got divorced. Mom got the house, but now she's working, 3 jobs to try to keep things up. Just all of these real, like, emotional issues that also, can tag back into, like Dave's saying, it's like everything has something about trafficking in it, whether it's, STDs, or whether it's, pregnancy, or if it's, somebody's just blowing a whole bunch of money on you at the mall. All these things happen, and somebody gives you attention when you're feeling down, or you're on social media, and people that you don't have it locked down to super private, anybody can meet you. So all of these little tags inside of our story work perfectly towards rolling it into the curriculum that we have. So it's like, you can ask questions about, well, what kind of risk factors were happening in Lisa's life before this boy tricked her, online. It's like, you should be able to come up with that list. And just one more thing about the script and experience and the characters and the locations and all that is, every line of dialogue has some hint of slavery inside of it, whether it's not being able to control where you are, control what you eat, maybe not even know what city that you're in. So all of that stuff actually makes it so that when you're a user, or you're a learner, and you walk away from this experience, if you remember the story and the situation, you'll remember how to recognize trafficking. And then Dave's curriculum actually just blows all that stuff up and takes it in different directions than you would ever expect.
Yeah, and I think it's important for people to know too. If you do go to reefcares.org and you subscribe to get emails from us, you'll be updated. We actually have a measurement tool that we've just completed, so that'll be going up live as well. And what that measurement tool does is it helps you to understand within about 10 minutes what your understanding of human trafficking is. Are you at a beginner level, and intermediate level, or you're more advanced? And then from there, you can move forward going through the information that we have available, and I mean wherever else you want to go to as well, to beef up on kind of what you already know, or if you're at that beginner level, where it is that you can go from there. And we're going to keep on adding more stuff to kind of help you navigate that process, because it's a lot when you find out what human trafficking is, and somebody goes, human trafficking, 40 million people, it's all over the planet, and you're like, okay, now I don't know what to do. So I just kind of get lost in all of it. And so that's why we're trying to develop these tools within the webpage to help kind of guide you a little bit, to bring you along incrementally so that you can understand it. And again, you can be that like army of one in your community to really fight against human trafficking. I mean, you're obviously part of a bigger network, but it's you is where the change is going to start with. So we want to do everything we can to help you, facilitate that change, and, making that impact. So, I would encourage anybody who's thinking like, where do I start with this? Maybe I'm interested in what these guys are saying. That would be a great thing to just start by getting that subscription, because it's just going to be an email that periodically pops up and lets you know, as we're moving closer to getting the web-based available, as we have these new tools available for you. It's just all things that can help people out. So
I get a question about the name. I don't know if you're familiar with Father Gregory Boyle in Los Angeles, who started Homeboy Industries, which is kind of like the largest gang interruption like organization in the world. Just amazing what he's done with gang members, and getting gang members out, teaching them jobs, giving them crafts, giving them the tools to be able to have a different life. But just an amazing guy. But his second book is called Radical Kinship. And I was kind of reminded of that his whole point is, if you really see someone as being a member of your family, you treat them a whole lot different, and there's a whole lot less, just throwing people under the bus, and like, well, how do I do something that's going to turn this person's life around? And it really kind of made me think of, why did you settle on this name of Radical Empathy?
Well, that's it's one of those very long questions, or long answers, that I'll try to make short. It really kind of came from me making an enormous failure, in a sense. So we were just talking about a cell phone version, right? So one of the things that I thought at the very beginning was, I would just make this killer app. People were going to download it. It was going to teach them everything that they needed. That would raise enough money so we could keep the whole process going, and be able to, hopefully raise enough money to do grants for other people. So when I first went to make this thing, I started meeting with the people from the Texas State Governor's office that are working in trafficking. So I talked to them about, they gave me a class on trafficking. I'm like, I got this, man. I'm going to go off. I'm going to make an app and bring it back. So I did, and the staff got a chance to take a look at it. They put their head in it, and this was on a cell phone. And the first thing they said was, this really doesn't make me care for the girls as much as it makes me it makes me think about the trafficker and his situation. And I was like going, okay, well, that's absolutely not the point of this thing. So we're going to start over from scratch. And my developer looks at me and she's like, you're going to what? I say, yeah, we're just starting over, delete everything, just forget everything we've learned. We're going to start over. And so when that conversation happened with the governor's office, they were like, look, what we have to do is this. We have to think about it this way. We have to raise radical empathy for these girls or these victims. And I was like, that's the name of our foundation, period. That's it. We're starting over from scratch. And then we got into a very productive conversation with them, which led to us using a case that was out of San Antonio as sort of the nucleus of the story itself. And that just, after that point, it kind of wrote itself. So yeah, and I'm super excited about that. So the point of everything was when Melissa was telling me about this, she was like, when we have to raise radical empathy for these victims. And I'm like, if that is not a sign that that's what this place is supposed to be named, I don't know what is. So I just told her right away. I was like, that's our name. Thank you very much. And that to me solidified everything. We also call our program One Generation because we want this to be able to make a change in one generation. And the application itself is called Trapped, a VR detective story, because you're playing as a detective and learning what it feels like to be trapped. So it's a VR detective story in VR, an online detective story online, and then there are other versions like the sequel and the sequel, like part 1, 2, and 3. They're all going to be completed later. So if you want to know what happens in those stories, we need you to go to reefcares.org and sign up on our mailing list. We expect to have at least 5 new members from tonight.
Absolutely.
It could be you. You're the one. You're listening right now. You're the one.
It is
subscribe.
you. It is you. Yeah.
You're the one. Like and subscribe. Follow.
I think that was pretty brief, but Patrick, just to jump the gun here, I'll give you the explanation on how I came to the name with human trafficking hater. I hate human trafficking, and that is it. that's the only backstory behind how I came up.
There's got to be more. There's got to be more.
There's nothing as the story is for Billy Joe's thing that it's such an intriguing story to me, right? Like, I mean, he gave you the quick version of it or whatever, but the fact that, I mean, it kind of gets lost in the description of it, but he was so dedicated to coming out with a quality product that he scrapped the first half of it. He didn't try to cut his losses. And going back to, again, not to like build him up, but I just think it's such an incredible thing. He literally sold his house, and then he used that money. And then with that money, he didn't say, oh my gosh, this isn't that great. How can we fix it? He said, this is garbage. I'm throwing this away. Let's start over with something great with his own money. And I mean, it's just, that's a lot to really be that committed to doing that. So, I mean, and thank God you did, because obviously, like, it's such a quality product at this point in time. Like I said, I just hate human trafficking. So my name was just significantly easier to come about.
Yeah. What is the video we have from you, right?
Oh,
that was the Ashton Kutcher. Why don't we play that?
Okay.
We're heading toward the end of things here.
Sure. Yeah, it's just got.
Ask you about some of the programs you've done, some of the information that you've gotten out through Human Trafficking Hater,
Sure.
which I think it's very, very interesting what you've done as well.
Yeah.
But maybe.
Yeah, and thank you. I appreciate you saying that it's interesting, because I think just like Billy Joe, there's a learning curve to trying to educate people about human trafficking. There's the I might have the wrong information. There's also the bore factor with just going into the details of the statistics is a really big one. So in my first couple of videos, so I encourage everybody. if you go to reefcares.org, that's great. And if you get done with that and you want to check out, some videos, go to Human Trafficking Hater. The first couple of videos, I have no problem saying that they are not the same quality as the videos that I'm putting out now. And I think that the videos I'm putting out now probably won't be the same quality as the videos in a year or two. And that's great, because that means I'm learning. But the first couple are just, it's total lecture. It's just me coming at you in an absolute teacher mode, just trying to give you all the education just straight. And then I learned that YouTube's different than a classroom. So I'm obviously still sharing factual information, but I have to present it a little bit differently. So, and plus with my audio, I was way, way out of my league on the audio. I was like, I gotta have this
Okay,
audio.
Dave, that's enough. That's enough beating yourself up.
Yeah,
Come on now.
We get it.
In any case,
Great
so
stuff. It's great
yeah,
stuff.
yes. So what it gets up to is the videos. There's I can tell you what human trafficking is. If you watch the first video, that's what it is. It talks all about what human trafficking actually is. Yeah, if somebody's using threat, force, or coercion against you, that's what human trafficking is. And then there's all these different topics that I just think are interesting, or that people give me ideas that they want to see it. So Ashton Kutcher is somebody who's been an advocate against human trafficking for years. So the video that we're going to see is just a 2-minute video just talking about some of the things that he's doing to let people know that, hey, here's a great advocate out there. And Tim Tebow's another guy. Billy Joe, I did one on radical empathy, so that's out there. There's there's about the foster care to sex trafficking pipeline, because that's a real thing that exists. There's a lot of
the Native American, girls is one that you've.
Yeah, so the most recent, one of the most recent ones that I just came out with is on Native Americans and sex trafficking, and they are the most disproportionately sex trafficked group that's out there. They're also the most disproportionately, I believe, domestic abuse and sexually abused group, and those are definitely precursors that make somebody vulnerable. You talk about stacking up those vulnerabilities. So Native American women specifically, really have a lot stacked up against them. They're in remote areas. There's fracking industry that's being put up next to where those reservations are. So it's created these man camps. And so there's a high demand for sex, but there's not a lot of women there. So and the situations that they're in, it kind of again, it doesn't force them, but it definitely stacks them up against the odds. So there's a lot of different episodes on there. I guess I can't really cover all of them. There's one where I talk about a pedophilia ring that runs across 44 countries. So it's everything in 5 to 10 minute videos. I try to keep it as brief as possible, but there's a lot of information.
They does not hold back on those videos. I mean, I got to tell you that a lot of times you hear some stuff that's pretty well, scrubbed down, so it's not quite so dirty. But Dave doesn't seem to have any problem keeping those gloves off, and honestly, that's one of the reasons I feel really good about working with him, because he doesn't mess around. I mean, he's on a mission, just like I am. And when you watch those videos, I think it comes through. I think you can tell.
Okay. On that note, let's roll this one and see what we're talking about.
Dramatic music. in my opinion, that's a great video. I'm biased, but I think it's
It
great.
is a great video. Come on now.
It is.
That was the first video where I did it without me talking over it. So most of the videos I'm actually narrating or kind of walking you through, uh, most of the content is coming from me, and in that one, I have just the words and the very dramatic music playing, and so. But it gets the message across, and it gets it across in a way that I think is what people are looking for more. Um, at least in some cases, or at least if it's an introduction to it, it's a brief introduction to a different topic every week about human trafficking. So
Yeah.
it might be sex trafficking rings this week. The following week it might be about labor trafficking. Then it might be about how you can eat a cheeseburger and it helps to fight human trafficking. And the next week it's going to be about foster care. And so it's going to be it's really meant to be. I'm not trying to make anybody a master of understanding human trafficking. I'm trying to introduce people to all the different ways that it can manifest itself. And then I think from there, you would, go out into the world and look for places like radical empathy or somewhere else to really kind of, sharpen your teeth and know more about human trafficking. I'm just trying to keep people introduced to all the different ways.
Well, and I think we're all on the same page in realizing that everybody's got something to bring to the fight. It's like everybody's got some skill set. Everybody has some area that they can bring, and also really looking at. I think this is the thing that came out, especially with labor trafficking, but also in pornography and different things. There are areas where we're intersecting with human trafficking, and it's uncomfortable to look at that. Like my desire to have high quality things for a really low price. A lot of that is fueling the labor trafficking that's happening around the world. Wanting cheap goods, and just the absolute all the time in your face exposure to pornography. Like it's easy to justify. I'm just watching. It's already made. I'm not having anything to do with producing this. There's no victim here. When actually you have absolutely no idea if that person that you're watching um, is a trafficking victim or not. You have absolutely no idea if she's being forced to do that, if she's enduring incredible suffering and pain in order to be there for you to take advantage of, or not. And I think also the number of people that have to perform that are trafficking victims that have to perform to do the things in porn that does lead increasingly to violence. It does lead to humiliation, the things that someone just, a 16-year-old or an 18-year-old or a 25-year-old doesn't just sign up to be abused in that way. So those are very often those are human trafficking victims. But we need to start looking and having those uncomfortable conversations of where might I possibly be intersecting with someone who's being trafficked. And then that also empowers you to kind of to make a choice.
Listen to me. People, they get tired of hearing me tell them about how everything in the world has something to do with trafficking. There's like, will you just shut up? I'm gonna enjoy some chocolate. I'm like, I don't see how you can enjoy chocolate because man, you're not really paying attention to what's happening.
Yeah.
It's rare earth minerals, phones, this and that, plastic, clothing. I mean, it just goes on and on.
It's overwhelming. But I think that's if we can make it easy, right? We can make it easier. So just there's fair trade chocolate right next to the other chocolate. Just
right.
And if I could interject really quick for that, labor trafficking was kind of a grind that I was on because I heard a lot of people talking about sex trafficking, and I thought somebody's got to talk about labor trafficking. And so before I had, not that I have like a huge following, but I've definitely got some people on Facebook that check out the stuff that I'm putting there. But when I think I had like 25 people or something, I was like, it's time to fight to fight labor trafficking. So I calculated out what it was if you say, look, I can't buy all my stuff fair trade because even though some of it is a reasonably priced, I mean, if you get a chocolate fair trade bar, it does cost like $1.50 or $1.80, whereas you can get the Snickers for like 60 cents, right? So for coffee, though, it does end up being pretty close. And so I figured if you can just say there's one item I'm going to get that's going to be fair trade so I can fight against labor trafficking, that could be your thing. And you think, well, that's going to take me forever by myself. And you are so right. But if you could get like your church or group to go along with you, I think it, and I don't have the numbers with me right here, but it was something like 236. So if you got 236 people to commit to drinking coffee for the year, because the average American drinks like 3.2 cups of coffee or something like that a year. And if there's somebody who is Googling this right now,
Yeah.
I'm just going
Not a
off
day.
the average. I'm sure somebody types in, actually in Seattle, it's 18 cups. So the average American's like 3 cups. So you can get it to where if you and just a reasonably small group of people are committed to doing that for a year, you will shut down an entire plantation that would take 20 trafficking victims to operate it. And that would be like in South America or in West Africa or something. So you think like, I can't do anything. All you have to do is be addicted to coffee and have 236 friends or 236 people in your church, and you can literally shut down an entire plantation. So, I mean, those are ways, me by myself, it'll take me 213 years or 236 years by myself, but if me and Billy Joe together do it, we'll get it done in 106 years. If you join in with us, well, now we're down, we keep chopping it up, and I'm not good enough at math that I can include you in that one, but I know that it's a smaller number. And the more people that you get on board, and that's what it really is you take your little snowball and you keep on rolling it, people get on board. They go, wait a second, you guys got it down to 60 years? Let's get it down to 40 years. Let's get it down to 3. And then let's get it down to next year. We shut down an entire plantation. And so I think those are the little things you can do.
Oh, that's so great.
That's what I think. This problem is so massive that we just need to take a little bite of this thing, just a little bite, whatever we can do, and we have to break it down so people can understand that you can actually make you can make a big difference doing a tiny thing every day.
Right. Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
Yeah, one person wrote in the comments too that when you were talking about one generation, they're saying, yeah, it takes 20 years to change a generation. So this is really possible. That we need to start changing this idea that this is possible.
Others Against Drunk Driving made a dent. They came out. They were grassroots. They raised awareness of drunk driving. They made a lot of laws change. So it's an effort. But if enough people do a little thing, we can change the world. And we're not the only groups fighting it. There's a bunch out there. We just got to get past that, that illusion of choice in our culture, continuing to inundate our children with, well, like you said, making them weak enough so that a trafficker can actually take advantage of them and they're already pre-groomed. Yeah. What is going on? We can do better than this, guys.
Well, and I mean, and if you even look at like going along with the grassroots efforts, I mean, even directly in human trafficking, GEMS was I believe the first, it's like a girls mentoring service started by Rachel Lloyd. She was a victim of human trafficking, or a victim of sexual abuse at least. And she started one of the first nonprofits that was like a shelter for trafficked women when nobody else was out there doing that. And then Polaris, which is one of the largest nonprofits in the country right now, that was started by 2 graduate students while they were still graduate students. So I empower everybody as much as possible. Don't bloom where you're planted, sort of thing. Don't think like, well, because I'm restricted by this. Think of the opportunities that you have because of wherever you are. Because it's just about getting that initial push, and like Billy Joe said, doing that little bit every day, or a couple times a week, or whatever it is, or sharing it with somebody else. You never know what that seed's really going to manifest into. So
I love that. Can I steal it?
Yeah.
Yes. Bloom with your plant.
This is all open comments here, right? This is for everybody.
Yeah, you're not stealing anything. We give it freely.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, no price tag.
So great. So great. Okay, well, I guess we're going to have to start to wrap up. What are your final comments, final asks, final things that you would like to communicate?
Oh man, I don't know who should go first here.
I'll try, and you can make notes on what I say and tell me all the things I've forgotten.
Fill in the gaps, yeah.
Right. I would say that we can make a difference. Whoever is listening to this, you can make a difference. This problem is enormous, but we're going to have to take a little bit at a time. We have worked very hard. We have a product that's working in middle schools, high schools, and teaching medical university students. We are going online with this thing so we can actually multiply our effectiveness. And this is it's a very real product. In fact, the University of North Texas Health Science Center actually just renewed their license. So we're starting on the 2nd year of serving a medical school. So if you think this is important enough for medical students to have it, we can get it to your children. We can get it to you. Once we're online, people can purchase their own logins. They can purchase things for their schools. We will work with anyone to make this work with them. We're looking for people that are interested in being some of our first users. So sign up as a subscriber, be the 5th subscriber of the day, you know, whatever it takes. We want you to be part of the solution with us. And really, we need people that are willing to help us spread the word until we finally go live. And then we're going to need those same people to try it, use it, tell us what's going on with it, and hopefully keep them going on and on. So go to reefcares.org. At the very top, there's a thing that says subscribe. In fact, we are going to be doing over the next couple of weeks, we're giving people an enormous download of resources that a teacher could use, that you could use. You could use it in a university study. I mean, this stuff, use it in study in the university. We had a lady from the International Justice Mission put together this huge document. It's got links to everything, and we give it all away to you if you just subscribe today. Subscribe today.
Subscribe today. Make it today. Don't make it tomorrow. Make it today.
No, right now, not even today, just right this moment. reefcares.org. Go right there and click on the subscribe now button. It's at the top of the page.
Yeah, and for me, ditto. Right, so that I fully endorse everything that Billy Joe's saying. I think for following along with it, it's just, and I've already said it a couple times at this point, but just think back on who the heroes are that are in the anti-trafficking field. It wasn't anybody sensational until they were sensational. It was Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth, Frederick Douglass, people who were enslaved at a time when slavery was legal. They were the ones that were championing against it and making real impact. So if somebody could be alive during a time where slavery was legal, they were enslaved, and still find a way that 200 years later we're still talking about them, or 100 plus years later, it's obviously possible for us today with all these things that we have at our disposal to try to make some sort of an impact. I mean, you've got a college professor hooked up with a former video game maker, and now we're trying to do what we can do. But obviously, we can't do everything by ourselves, just like Harriet Tubman didn't do everything by herself. She was part of a network. She had all sorts of people that were in New York, and she knew people in Pennsylvania, and the Underground Railroad was established 100 years before she was even born, and so, or before she even became a part of it, although she's the most famous conductor in it. So I think that's just my biggest thing, is that I know that I've said it over and over again, but I'm sure there's somebody who's still out there. Maybe this is the point where it's pushing you over the edge, where you're like, yeah, I really can be a part of that change. And because I don't know what it is, doesn't mean I can't learn more about it, or I can't do something. And it's, going to Reef Cares is a great way to do that. You can go on there and get those resources. You can stay connected, and it's a two-way conversation too. It's not just us telling you stuff. We want to hear what you have to say to us as well. And if you want to get, exposure to more topics, obviously Human Trafficking Haters, a wonderful resource that you can go on to YouTube. I'm on Facebook with it as well. I definitely like to have interaction with people there. And you're going to find more stuff about radical empathy on there, because I just spent the last 2 weeks covering videos there. So if you don't want to hear about radical empathy, don't go on Human Trafficking Hater, because I'm still over there pushing that too. But and honestly, I think I just want to say thank you to everybody, because we're 2 hours into it now, and if you stuck with us for this long, we appreciate you. I mean, maybe you stuck around for Patrick, but we appreciate you being here to listen to what we had to say. So.
Yeah, and this will live way beyond this. This will go onto YouTube, and this will be accessible far beyond this evening.
Right now, in the future, go to reefcares.org and subscribe.
It doesn't matter what day it is.
Right. You could say, you won't be a part of the first 5 if you wait until YouTube, because that first 5 is happening tonight, but you can still get into the action. So
there you go. I just really want to thank you guys so much. It's just been a blast, and we'll have to have you back again. And I really hope everyone also look for radical empathy to also be part of See It Ended in the future. Because this is really why we built See It Ended, is for people like this and organizations like this and tools like this to get out into the general public. We need to unleash the power of media to really making a difference in the space. I also want to let you know. Okay, so next week, hopefully, we'll have Anita Cordell, who was one of the filmmakers, a director and filmmaker who had a couple of films in the film festival this year. One of my favorite films this time was a short film called Dangerous Profession. So she's the director of that film, so she'll be here with us. Just an amazing person who's really taken her skills and talent to use them to educate people about human trafficking as well. So I hope you'll join us for that. This has been an incredible conversation, and I really hope that your hearts have been opened and that you really see a place where you can fit in to helping us to bring an end to human trafficking in one generation. We've got our work cut out for us, and we can do it. We got the tools to use today. So that being said, I really want to thank everyone who helped make this possible, especially Wei, who's behind the scenes, all of the people who helped to put this on through Twitch TV, the really important community. And now we're going to raid another person who's streaming. They're doing a stream for charity today for Triangle Beagle Rescue. So they're trying to rescue dogs that are being in need of being rescued. There's a whole lot of rescuing that needs to be done on our planet today, and we can all participate and appreciate that. So please, we're going to raid over now to raiding Killing Bird, and I hope that everyone will kind of shift over there and bring the spirit that you've gotten from See It Ended over to raiding Killing Bird. Thank you very much for everyone who's been there with us tonight and in the future. We'll see you again next Tuesday. Thank you so much.
You bet.
Good night.